Oh yeah. Hey yo, it's the Russo Show. Hey yo, it's the Russo Show.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Pizza Film School. Joining us this week is the incomparable Emerald Fennell. Emerald, welcome to Pizza Film School. Thank you so much for eating some pizza with us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Ant, you guys want to introduce your pizza real quick and we'll get that out of the way?
This week we are having pizza from Olio, which is located not too far from AGBO headquarters in downtown Los Angeles. It's at the Grand Central Market. I have a margarita. I see you have a pepperoni. And Joe, what do you have? Or you don't have something from Olio, do you?
I don't know what I have. It's in front of me. I gotta try to eat it through the monitor here. So Emerald, let's talk about Promising Young Woman. Just so everyone is aware, directorial debut, nominated for 5 Oscars, winner of Best Screenplay. Just an incredible film. Very powerful. I watched it for the first time with my 14-year-old daughter, and it was a really profound experience for her. It's rare that you can watch a film and have such a sort of emotionally impactful experience with a family member, and also a very deep and thoughtful conversation after the movie. And that was one of those rare experiences. Because Anthony and I grew up loving films, we cherish those experiences. So thank you for giving that to me and my daughter, and I'm sure to many other families around the world who had very intelligent and thoughtful conversations following the film. The modus operandi of Pizza Film School is to demystify the craft of filmmaking and let people in behind the curtains so that we can inspire young storytellers and young filmmakers around the world who may not have access to film school or other opportunities that some of us have had access to. So we just want to talk a little bit about your process as a filmmaker. Can you just give us a little bit of your backstory? Where did you grow up? When did you become interested in the arts? And just talk a little bit about your journey to directing personally, your emotional journey.
So I grew up in London mostly, but also in a part of England called Herefordshire, which is incredibly beautiful, kind of rural, sort of the least populated area of England, actually. It's the place that C.S. Lewis based Narnia on, the Golden Valley. It's just a very beautiful place. And I think when I think of growing up, I think of that place because it felt magical. It felt like a place where your imagination could kind of run around. I can't think of a time where I wasn't completely and utterly obsessed with films, TV, books, making up stories, making up plays, constant. I certainly think that for me, when I think of my life, I've had 2 lives, and one is in the real world and one is in the kind of imaginary world. So much of my time is spent in a kind of fugue state, thinking elsewhere, living other lives, or thinking of stories. And that has been, I just don't remember a time when that didn't happen, from when I was really, really small. And so me and my sister, I have a younger sister called Coco, and we were really lucky to have incredibly relaxed parents who let us watch whatever we wanted, as long as it wasn't violent. Pretty much it was like, watch whatever you like, in maybe slightly European way. And so we just, and they also didn't have a time limit on TV, which I know a lot of parents are really weird, not weird, it's a personal choice, but a lot of parents mind about how much media their kids consume. My parents, I think partly because they were both working 16-hour days, and partly because they love TV and movies themselves. They were just like, yeah, have at it, however long you want. So me and my sister would just spend hours and hours and hours and hours rewatching Fantasia and The Little Mermaid and all of those Disney movies. And then kind of more adult, well, not adult, but teen movies like Don't Tell Mum the Babysitter's Dead, Drop Dead Fred, kind of slightly darker 90s comedies that, and then later I became obsessed with things like really kind of, I don't want to say trashy because that sounds pejorative, but movies like Lifetime movies, like Poison Ivy and The Crush, and things that were sort of like, now I look back on them, slightly sexploitation of kind of Lolita-style girls, which definitely fed into, I think, something like Promising a Woman. But yeah, I don't think there was a time where I wasn't obsessed with it and where I wasn't writing or reading. I didn't sleep. I was, and I'm still an insomniac, so I don't really sleep very much at night. And so I just read lots of horror. And
can you identify what it is about storytelling that you're obsessed with it? Can you pinpoint some moment in your youth? We became obsessed with storytelling because we're from a large Italian family.
Right.
We used to spend every Sunday around the dinner table entertaining each other with, stories about our everyday life. And of course you'd embellish it and try to make people laugh, and you'd play up the drama of it. Do you know what the essential allure for storytelling is for you?
That's so funny. I've never really thought about that. Certainly in my family, my mother is a writer. My father is an unbelievable kind of epic joke teller and kind of Shaggy Dog story, I guess, anecdotalist. So certainly there was a sense of all of us trying to out-funny each other. Like being kind of funny, taking the piss, teasing in my family was like a huge thing. So I think in a kind of roundabout way, I guess, in terms of the tone of how I think and write, is that there's nothing too dark. There's nothing too monstrous. In my family, it's very much like the more macabre, the more gothic the sensibility, the more monstrous, the sort of funnier we find it. And I suppose that's maybe a kind of coping mechanism or a kind of very British thing, I don't know. But in terms of storytelling and why, I absolutely think it's a pathology. I think it's a split personality. I think I would have gone mad very early on if I didn't have an outlet for it. I think partly for me it's a kind of like, maybe I have quite a sort of extreme, not extreme, that makes me sound very high octane and exciting, which I'm not, but like, I think that if I didn't live a lot of parallel lives, I'd be in trouble in my real life. So my real life is very contained and sort of straightforward and lovely. And, I married the man I've been with for 19, when I was 19, since I was 19. Sorry, I'm very jet lagged. So my own life is very sort of stable, but the life that I lead outside of it is completely insane. And if I didn't have that, I think I'd be in a ditch.
When you write, do you inhabit your characters? Are you playing them in the room as you type them?
Definitely. So I don't write on paper at all as much as I can. So a script will be the last thing I do. I absolutely hate drafting. That sounds so sort of, I'm just not comfortable doing it. The worst process for me is like the outline thing, which is so much a part of how so many people write, and I really understand why. But for me, by the time it's on paper, it's already kind of fossilized. It's already happened. So I try and keep it inside my head for as long as I can. So something like Promising a Woman, I spent, years writing it in my head, and the draft that is on screen is the second draft. The draft that, that Film Nation and Lucky Chat bought was the first draft, and then I did some small, mostly kind of production rewrites.
And when you say you're writing in your head, you're telling yourself the story. You have the essential story, right? You have the beginning, middle, and an end.
No.
In your head?
It's sort of total immersive. So I guess it's like, I think of it, it's sort of difficult to describe, because I think, like, for everyone's process, you think it's sort of normal because there's no other way you've ever done it, and then you speak to other people and for them it seems like a very obtuse, silly way of doing things. But no, I guess it's like I just go in. So usually I'll listen to music, I'll have a playlist that I'll just play over and over and over again for years and years, so it's kind of almost background, and each song usually will trigger a different moment. But a bit like a VR experience, I suppose. I'll just go in, and so I'll be in the room, I guess I'll just, a scene from Promising Young Woman might be useful. So like that first scene when she goes home with someone. No, someone takes her home. I will go into Jerry's apartment. So I'll be in Jerry's apartment and, over the course of months, years, when I revisit it, there'll be more detail. So there'll be stuff on the floor. He's not expecting someone to come home with him. So like there's going to be half-eaten snacks everywhere. There's going to be, sort of plaid shirts on the floor. His bed might be made just, but messily. So moment by moment, the world gets built, and then the conversation changes. So I'll start the conversation, and again, every time I go back, it becomes a little bit more detailed. Things will change. Sometimes he'll say something and I don't like it, or it doesn't work, or it feels phony, and then so it's just building like that forever until finally I don't know how it happens, but it just is ready, and then I just write it all down in like a week.
And in that process, do you find yourself building the narrative in a linear way, or you float through it?
Float through it. It tends to be reasonably linear, but it usually, I think it builds out in these funny, I tend to have little moments, and then things come out of those. They're not necessarily linear, but they tend to kind of signpost. I find that, your brain works in a way where it's sort of done a lot of work for you, so you think suddenly a scene that feels like it's out of nowhere is actually quite easy to thread in. But I mean, it's amazingly fun.
Yeah, let me ask this. You say fun. There are certainly some traumatic scenes in the film. When you live inside those scenes, are you able to protect yourself? Are you able to separate it from, if you're losing your psyche in the scene? I'm just curious as a writer, whether you're able to separate it, or whether it's part of the process for you to go through the emotion of it.
I don't know. I definitely in the moment feel it very deeply, but I don't bring it home. Because again, it's so much a part of my life. Because also when I was little, it was always, a body washes up on the river. It was always like my sister is stolen from her bed in the middle of the night. It was always traumatic, actually. And I think really maybe that's the way my brain works. So that I don't know is the answer. So I don't feel like I feel actually the opposite. I feel like particularly with something like Promising Young Woman, I feel like if I hadn't talked about it, if I hadn't thought about it that deeply over such a long period of time, that would have been the thing that would have made me distressed. I found talking about it and thinking about it very deeply therapeutic, actually. I suppose.
I'm going to go out of order here and then we'll go backwards, but this is a really fascinating process. And so I just want to ask you, when you get to set, having lived in the story for years in your head, are you able to, did you feel an ability to translate what was in your head to the screen in a seamless fashion? But did you find yourself frustrated at times that it wasn't exactly what you had imagined? Are you able to let go of what's been in your head?
It's so interesting. A lot of it is kind of who you're working with. And I was really, really lucky to work with an amazingly brilliant and experienced and agreeable team. So people like Michael Perry, who was the art director on it, who kind of made all the sets and did all. He really got it. Like, I went to him with just an insane, the mood boards that I make, and the mood board for my new movie, it's just like it's oppressively detailed. Like, everything is oppressively detailed. And I was lucky that with Ben, my DP, and with Michael, and actually with everyone who worked on it, they understood that it was sort of a pathological thing for me. And so they kind of let me be that over-invested in every single thing. But also I think, yes, when you're working with brilliant people, you can let go because they come to you with stuff that's better than what you imagined. And that's the dream scenario. And also, I think that, you know, the best thing that you can do as a director, and the thing that I've seen, I think I've been very lucky working as an actress slash actor, where I've seen what doesn't work. And I think the worst thing is that somebody who has a very specific idea in their head and they just cannot communicate it, whether it's with the performance or with the look or whatever it is of the movie. You get these directors who just like are eminently? I'm all right, I should know. Don't know. Well, people who just get unbelievably frustrated because they're like, it's here, but I can't. And you're like, well, that's no good. So for me, so much of it is about, if I'm going to be as specific as I am, I have to do the homework and I have to bring it to people. So much of what I do is like to make sure up front that people really understand exactly what I mean. Because otherwise it's no good. It's not fair to say to your DP, I want it to be like a pastel, fake, nightmarish, stifling female hellish Candyland, because he's going to be like, okay, what? You know, I have to be like, it's this. It has to smell like vanilla. It has to be kind of Versailles. Look at this kind of hideous faux Versailles toilet that I found on, you know, Pinterest years ago. It's like it's that kind of stuff. It's the kind of level of detail that I will go into that makes it, I hope, a bit easier for me and them. If that is if that's the longest answer you've ever received.
No, it's good. It's good to drill into that part of the process, because that is something that's very big for Joe and I as well. I mean, the amount of verbal and visual communication that you have to do in order to have a group of people, a group of collaborators, sort of share the same vision is exhaustive. And we try to do that very early in the process and thoroughly, so that by the time you get to the more difficult, more fast-moving parts of the filmmaking process, people have that sort of connection.
That's amazing to hear, because I can't begin to imagine the complication of doing movies on the scale that you guys work. Like the number of people that need to understand very specifically what you need, and the kind of fast-moving nature of it, and the fact that you're shooting, I mean, presumably on all sorts of like, you've got second units, you've maybe got even third units. I don't know, like that kind of stuff is, how does, I mean, I know that I'm allowed to ask you guys questions, right?
Yes, of course. I mean, you put your finger on it. It does, everything increases exponentially with that number of people. So again, it sort of goes down to having a very disciplined, structured process where you step through it with your sort of range of collaborators in a methodical way, where you're speaking to the core group. Then you sort of expand that to a larger group. And then the core group is also working in subgroups after having sort of had that moment together. It requires a lot of organization. Thankfully, when we started working at that scale, we were working with a company, Marvel Studios, that had made a number of films, so they sort of understood that level of organization, which we were able to sort of watch and borrow and sort of make it our own as we went through the process. And we were always very grateful for that, to be working with people so sort of well thought out in terms of what the process is, and understanding how people need to use it.
I was gonna say, the script is really important for us, because we feel like that's the document that, you know, the thousands of people who are going to engage on the movie from beginning to end, that's the information, right? That's the critical information by which they're going to make decisions and collaborate with us. How is, you know, is the script fixed with you? Do you like improvisation? Is the level of detail in your script significant? Do you describe, as you're talking about the toilet you may have found on Pinterest, or are they described in your script in a level of detail that, is that how you choose to communicate, or did you find you like to communicate through meetings?
God, that's such a good question. I think, my scripts are a bit annoying, I think, for a lot of people, because I sort of have this awful feeling that people don't read stage directions. In fact, it's not a feeling, I know it. Because often, in everything I've worked on, from every side, people have asked questions, and I would say, yeah, it's in the stage directions, guys. Of course, because it's in the stage directions. And so part of me now, I find it, I actually prefer that the stage direction is quite lean. I think that then probably I do communicate perhaps in meetings and also visually again, I with Promising a Woman, I sent the mood board, the obsessive mood board and my playlist to everyone. I needed to sort of say, I know what this reads like, and it reads like a woman, you know, me and Kerry would always say, you know, it feels like a woman staring out of a rainy window wearing a grey sweater, and that is not what this movie is. It's very important that it's the opposite of that it's sort of about how women are expert at covering and using the way that things look to kind of, I don't know, divert attention away from themselves and that kind of thing. So for me, it's kind of like a triple thing. With the new movie I'm doing next, it's the same, I suppose, package. In that what I'll send to people is those three things so that they kind of understand the feel of something as much as anything else. And then really, I think with stage directions, it's not so much about detail for me as it is, like, vibe is such an obnoxious word, but it's sort of you set the tone. I tend to use it a little bit more like, if the movie is a dark comedy, is something like I would say Promising a Woman is. If a movie's a dark comedy, you need to set that tone really quick, and you don't, sometimes the dialogue doesn't do that for you because it's incredibly dry, or it's sort of delivered in a kind of very specific way. So you need to kind of say, I think like the opening of Promising a Woman was the guys grinding in slow motion, shot like sexy women in music videos, but it's just guys in chinos, kind of. And that, I think that opening in the directions really established what the movie was, even if it wasn't like the most detailed thing in the world in terms of like active, the stuff. Does that make sense? I will say again, I'm terribly jet lagged and I have two incredibly small children. There may be points where I'm not even speaking in English.
No, you're making perfect sense. Yeah.
It's an amazing conversation. We're really grateful that you're being so forthright about it. Can I ask about
Joe, hey, hold on. Maybe we'll take a little break because I know you said you were hungry. Maybe we'll have a little pizza mid interview so we can.
Can we review? Can we review it?
Yes, we can.
Do we eat on screen? Is this for the pizza fetishists?
It's a very personal choice about whether you eat on screen or not.
I don't. I'm delighted to do so.
Okay.
Anth, we've never had Alio, so this is.
Yeah, I'm excited.
When I was at university, the Domino's pizza delivery guy and I became so close that he asked me on a date.
Really?
Because only the guy on the phone, and I was like, I can't believe, like, thank you for asking the woman who is ordering like up to 3 large Hawaiians for one.
Weekly.
I'm gonna say, what's your topping?
Every week.
What's your topping of choice?
In those days, it was a Hawaiian, usually because it was I was so hungover that I just needed some sugar on top of everything else. But but it was very kind of him, and it cheered me up.
Okay, so speaking of university, while we eat, I want to ask you a little bit about. You went to Oxford to study English literature, is that correct? Mm-hmm. And you started acting at the time?
Yeah.
And then you were discovered by an agent while you were acting. Mm-hmm. Let me ask a little bit about, because Anth and I had different roads into the film business as well. He went to law school and then ended up dropping out of law school.
Briefly.
Yeah. I was a writer first, then an actor, then a director. So, we had an unorthodox path to directing. Talk a little bit about your journey from acting to writing to directing.
So I was acting first. So I was at university, and I was in a play called Rabbit by Nina Raine, which was wonderful, and the part was kind of like just a turbo monster. The sort of part that it was just like a dream. And Lindy King, who is an incredible agent and who looks after Olivia Colman and all sorts of incredible people in England, came to see me and very kindly took me on. I was, like lots of people, trying to sort of get that going, get that bone-crushingly cruel job going. And I should say at this point what I always like to say, and it's kind of a little bit about you know, and what you guys are saying about how to get into this industry, I still think that if I hadn't have been lucky enough that my parents lived in London and I could live with them while I was trying to get this stuff going, there's just no way I could have done this. And I do think that it's still, I don't know about here in Hollywood, I don't know it so well, but in England it's still almost impossible to get into this industry if you're not middle class from London, because so much of it is unpaid at the beginning. So I do think, like, I always want to caveat talking about how, you know, I'm lucky enough to be sitting here with the fact that I'm lucky enough because I've benefited from an incredibly unfair system still. So much I think a part of the like conversations I'm having now with the next thing is kind of how do we improve that stuff, because it's not fair, it's profoundly unfair. But having said that, I was sort of auditioning, doing all that stuff, and then I was writing at the same time.
Did you start writing first before you were interested in acting? Same time?
Always the same. I've always been writing, always been acting, you know, at school, whatever. What happened though was I got a part in a TV series called Call the Midwife, which is just the most wonderful show in England, and it's a BBC programme and it's incredibly popular, incredibly beloved. And it was a joy because of so many reasons, mostly because I'm still incredibly good friends with everyone who worked on it. It's just a lovely thing to do. But it was 6 months and then 6-month hiatus. So I did it for 3 years. And in the hiatus, I wrote novels. So my first 2 books were for kind of middle grade. They were kind of horror for like 12 plus. And then my last book, my most recent book, Monsters, was an adult thriller, but with a child protagonist. And then that book, an amazing writer called Jessica Knappett, who wrote a great comedy series in Britain called Drifters, she read Monsters and asked me to come and write on her 4th series. You know, that's how I got my first credit, basically. And she's incredible because she was also the person who gave Phoebe Waller-Bridge her first credit. So Jess Knappett is one of those kind of like brilliant geniuses who I owe everything to, really.
Wow, yeah, that's, I mean, you know, having somebody like that in your journey and learning the craft is, you know, I think is extremely important for many of us.
Yeah.
Certainly was for Joe and I as well. By the way, take a break and eat whenever you like. I know we're keeping you talking.
I'm just going to eat while you talk.
Yeah, exactly. Do you remember the moment when the first idea for Promising Young Woman entered your brain? Was it a scene, you know, what was the first idea you had toward this film?
It was a drunk girl with someone undressing her, drunkenly saying, "What are you doing?" And then sitting up sober and saying, "What are you doing?"
Hey. Hey. I said, what are you doing?
Very fully formed, I would say. And I guess what it would have been is usually it starts with kind of a bit of wish fulfillment. I would have been thinking about something along those lines and thinking, as I often do, what would I do? I wonder what I could do. I wonder what would happen if. I wonder what would happen if I went to a nightclub and pretended to be really drunk and let someone take me home. I wonder what would happen. I wonder what that conversation would be like. And it would have been, it would have been born out of, I don't know, a conversation that somebody would have had about girls getting too drunk and being irresponsible with their bodies. Or there are so many, it's such a difficult one because I can't remember exactly, because the number of conversations I've had with my female friends about this stuff is just like, I don't know, going back over years and years. And it's a funny one about the kind of, when the film came out, there was a lot of stuff about it being a kind of Me Too movie. And the Me Too movement is incredible, and thank God for it. But it was an interesting one because I felt very much like Me Too was just news to men. Because for every woman I knew, it was like, everyone lives with this all the time. It's relentless, constant. You know, all of the things that were coming out. There was a sort of statistic that came out in England a few years ago that was like the first time girls experience sexual harassment is at the age of 9. And of course, the response from very kind men is whoa. The response from women is like, remember it. We all remember it. all the time. So I guess that's a very roundabout way of saying this is kind of a sort of like injustice that had been burning for a long time, and this kind of cultural thing that I grew up with, that we all grew up with, which was like, drunk girls are fair game. Drunk girls are comedy. Like taking drunk women home or girls home or getting them drunk at parties is the fodder for mainstream comedy movies and TV series. And so our bodies and what happens to them is kind of a joke. So I wanted to make a movie which was taking that joke and saying like, I don't know, how funny is it now? How funny is this joke? And the most important scene to me, I think, aside from the kind of opening scene that I thought of, was the Max Greenfield, the moment after, spoiler alert, Cassie is murdered.
What a night. Ooh, the fucking nurse? Are you kidding me?
There's the most broadly comic scene in the whole movie, which is like the post when the best man, is what we call in England, when he comes in and he's like, you killed the stripper, like, holy fucking shit, what do we do, man? Like, and it's just like this sort of screwball thing, and it's just a movie that we've all seen. And the one thing I felt so strongly about, I just got to see the movie twice with an audience, once at Sundance and once at a test screening. That was the scene where I knew that it kind of lived or died, the movie, because the first time someone laughed in that scene and everyone else laughed, and it was just like the worst kind of horrified laughter. I thought like, that was the moment, because we've seen that scene so many times before. So again, I'm giving the longest answers, and I just want to talk to you guys about what you do. And I'm just talking about myself.
No, it's excellent. I'm glad you're giving
Amazing answers. Again, like this is really a really profound conversation, and getting to understand your process, and I think sharing that process is super important. So we're really grateful that you're being so descriptive about it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.